Welcome. We're live from Shift, and I am here with Commvault's Chief Security Officer, Bill O'Connell, and Commvault's Deputy Chief Security Officer, Will Galway. And this is the CISO Paradox, a podcast to discuss leading security in the age of personal accountability. We're living in challenging times for CISOs. Why? Well, CISOs are oftentimes held personally and legally accountable for the security outcomes at companies, but they don't necessarily directly own the budget, the people, or the technologies that drive those security outcomes. That makes for a pretty challenging job. And so we're going to talk about that today and what it means to be a modern CISO and how the role is evolving inside the largest enterprises in the world. I'm going to kick it to Bill first. Bill, what do you do?
Yeah, I think I love the title of our session, that it's about this paradox, right? There's a true dilemma here where, on the one hand, you want the leader of security and the security team to have accountability, ultimate accountability, but also we talk about things like a shared responsibility model, right? So how do you balance those two things? How do you have an organization that can ensure that the security of the company is where it needs to be, but also recognizing that they can't be everywhere. So you also need to worry about all the people in the organization, all of the technology, all of the systems and processes. So I like to think of it as the paradox is allowing both things to be true and focusing on, yes, do we have the right security expertise, but also how do we change the culture of the organization? So it's, culture as code, that everybody knows what they can do. And if you can get the entire organization to think a little bit more about security, that's probably more impactful than hiring one more person in the security team. So I think it's both of these things, but it really has changed over time.
Your deputy, Will, here is trying to turn everybody in the company into the guardians of security. How do you do that, Will, as the attacks are just getting more and more complicated? I mean, we have all gotten phone calls from Sanjay Mirchandani, our CEO, in just the last week, asking for gift cards and money transfers leading up into shifts. So how do you think about making sure all of us are smart enough? How do you change the culture into the shared responsibility model?
Yeah, and I think it's important to use influence over authority. Like you said in the open, we don't have control of every system or every person or their personal WhatsApp. So these are just things we have to use influence to work with business leaders and to work with other heads of departments and just get that message out to our people. I think everyone has a responsibility to security, but it's all to make the business move faster. And I think there's things we can do and we are doing to help enable that. I think it's just really important to get that security culture that Bill had mentioned up and running. And I think we're doing a good job with that right now.
Yeah, I would agree. By the way, the calls and the texts were fake. They were a phishing attempt. They weren't real. Just to make sure everybody listening. So Bill, how do you think about how to structure a modern security organization inside a company today? Because it's not just blocking and tackling, identity access issues. How do you think about it?
Yeah, I think partly you need a certain level of expertise, but where I've seen different models of security organizations in the past, I've seen some that try to take the approach where security is the hero, the firefighter that handles everything. And when you create that wall and that separation, then you take the responsibility off everybody in the organization. They can say, well, I'm just going to do what I do, and then security will do the security stuff. And I don't think that model works. I think we need to think of it more as, when you're building a house, there's not a plumber or an electrician and then a security electrician or a security plumber, right? The plumber and the electrician need to know how to do their job securely from the beginning. So I think when we think about the modern org, it's where are the right people and roles and functions that should be in the security team, and then where can we help other teams be more secure? And so how can I help a service organization see what are the parts of their day where security is important, and how can I teach them to be more skeptical? When I think about a product engineering organization, I can't have developers that don't think about security and then a security team come fix it, right? Like for years now, companies have been on the march to shift left so that we have developers think securely, build securely, and then yes, there's the security team that will also do some checks, but we're not there to catch everything. The team has either prevented it in the first place, or if they created a vulnerability, they fixed it long before it gets to production. So those are the types of things where the modern security org is true expertise that can help enable all those other teams to do what they do more securely.
And I think real quick, to Bill's point, I think there's moving to where the business is. I think it's really important. And I think, not having the standard security silos that we've seen in the past. So you have to move where the business is and connect at that level. To Bill's point about, developers and people that are closer to the product. I mean, there's training and there's ways that we can get a security uplift overall. On top of the product, we can do it back internally as well. I think we need to mirror these things and get to the business where that is in order to uplift what we do.
That's a great point. I want to get very specific here. So for organizations that are maturing their cybersecurity function out of necessity, but maybe have put off the investment as long as possible, your organization and the things that you're tasked with doing is sort of explosive. You are responsible for making sure the products that are built are secure when they end up in the hands of customers. You're responsible for You're almost the last mile with a customer before they buy. They want to talk to one of you two and make sure they understand that, the products are built with security in mind and what will happen if, the unthinkable emerges. You're tasked with making sure everybody in the company is protecting our access to what matters internally. Educating, because you can't have a team that is so large, right? So you have to educate the developers on how to code security. You have to educate the sales field on how to sell securely. How do you think about this? I mean, it's quite a huge remit. I would ask it this way. Who do you think are your top 5 key roles that you have in a modern CISO organization?
It's tough to answer because, like you mentioned, all of those areas are so important. I think one of the things that when I, coming into any new organization, I have to understand what is the business doing and what's the business trying to accomplish. And I think that's something that's changed a lot over time, is that a security org has started off as just say no to everything. And then we realize, well, we can't. Everything is connected. Everything is digital. So how can I make sure that we are being secure by design and we are educating the company and meeting them where they are, yep, right? So that we can do that. I think also, you were asking about what are the key roles in the org. I'm not sure I could rank them. I think because they all do such different things. But ultimately, for me, I start off with what is the business trying to accomplish and what are the risks, right? Everything needs to be risk driven. And so if I have a team focused on application security or a team focused on looking at the infrastructure or cloud, we almost need it's so important that we use risk as kind of that single taxonomy for how do we talk about all of the things that could go wrong, so that I can compare an architecture design issue that I don't like with a potential vulnerability in an application, and all the way down the line in the security team, so that when we say something is critical, what does that mean? And I don't have to make the leaders in the company cybersecurity experts all the time. I'm not talking to them about CVSS scores or I've translated it into, when I say something is critical, that means, hey, we have to stop what we're doing. When I say something's high, you should be worried. And likewise, when I say something's low, just know we're watching it. But I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I'm going to disproportionately spend my time on the critical and high issues. And so I think all the roles in the organization, especially in the security organization, need to understand what that taxonomy is, so we can talk to the business in a way they'll understand and not have to get in discussions about SQL injection and how to avoid it.
I also think it's important to keep in mind, like when you're talking about risk like that, most of the time risk goes off of likelihood or risk as set by some authority, some guiding authority, but we have to look at impact of the business. I think it's a really important way to measure it, and it's what drives that criticality rating is how could it impact us, and that's the order in which we'll go after things. And I think it's a healthy approach. It's a straightforward thinking approach because I just think it matters the order in which you do it.
So let's talk about risk realized for just a few minutes. The three of us have been through a breach response together, which is the best way to learn. What are the characteristics, what are the personality traits of leaders that are on the forefront of a breach response? I'll start with you, Will.
I think hygiene is really important, and I think that in most public breaches we hear about, it starts with hygiene. And I think for a good leader, I think not letting perfect be the enemy of good, just to make sure that we get to where we need to in order to protect the company. I do think that good traits of leaders not just look at that, but they also build relationships and trust across different business units. We're all in this together, and every little bit makes a difference, whether that's you're dealing with different people in the business or different employees in different parts in different regions. I think it's really important for everyone to be able to come together and know what their responsibility is in that kind of shared security culture model.
And Bill, you are in front of boards of directors. How do you think about that moment where, whether you sound it or not, the alarm is sounding? Who are you in that moment, and what do you think are the best characteristics of leadership when you're facing a crisis?
I think for me personally, I find it funny. I will get so frustrated in traffic, but when there's something very serious happening, I can be very, very calm. And I think that's probably one of the most important traits, is that you will have imperfect information. You will have a million people asking you questions, and you really have to be able to focus to say, okay, what do I need to do right now? What's the next thing I need to do? While also thinking about the big picture about, okay, by the end of the day, where do I need to be? And then communicating outward. And it's interesting, I have a lot of conversations with customers, and across my career I've had to do this, and sometimes you have to do the mea culpa. Other times it's more proactive and like you mentioned, trying to instill trust early on. And you can kind of see who are the CISOs that have had an issue and who haven't. Because there are many that say, "Oh, well, you had X, Y, and Z issue happen. We can't work with you." And you start to realize, if you've been in it long enough, that you'll run out of companies to do business with. Right? Everybody has an issue at some point, or they just don't know about it yet. So what's more important is, how did they handle it? How did they respond? Are they being transparent? And so, that's what I look for when I'm talking to other CISOs, that I think that's the type of mentality that you need to have. My favorite analogy is, it's like a boxer who plans to never get punched in the face. Like, that's just not a good strategy. So you have to be prepared that something will happen. And so are you always looking for it? Are you never satisfied with the program, right? There's always something better you could be doing. So when you plan for the year, plan in 10 to 15% budget and time that's open, because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to change. We don't know how AI is going to change our jobs in a year. So rather than think that you can have all the answers, allow yourself a little bit of flexibility, allow yourself so that you can be resilient and see, where do I need to adapt?
So let's tread into deeper waters. Trust scales or stalls at a moment of truth. So your company has experienced a breach, or somewhere in the supply chain has experienced a breach that affects you. How do you ensure that you strengthen trust through that process instead of break it with customers, with your employees, with your board, with your executives? And then I'm going to add on one other piece to this, which is, the response to a breach doesn't take a day, it doesn't take a week, sometimes it takes months, and a lot of people go back to their day jobs, but the security team and the teams perhaps that were affected and the customers and the vendors still have to live with this until it's some natural conclusion, but it's never quick. So how do you keep the energy up and the focus up? So sort of those two things let's explore for a minute.
Yeah, I think having the right controls in place is, of course, important. It's also the process about how you get there. Knowing that things will change, new technology will come at a faster and faster pace. It's not just enough to have a checklist and say, did I do these 10 things? It's also, by what process are you deciding what those 10 things are, and how will it be different next year? And so being adaptable is, and having that mindset is probably as important as, taking an inventory of what technical controls I have on any given day. I think that's, what I look for in my team, and when I'm talking to other CISOs, I think that's the best trait I've seen is being adaptable towards, and appreciating that you can't have all the answers. So what's your process to determine what that prioritization should be?
Yeah, I also think that, you talked about fatigue, right? Especially after breaches occurred and people get back to their day jobs. I think if you're measured along the way and you're constantly measuring yourself, you know where you're at, you know how far you're progressing with it, you know what's left to be done. So I think that measurement is really important in order to know when to sound the alarm and when to stop sounding it, and try to get back to a normal flow of business. But I think that all comes from all the prep work that you do ahead of time, in order to get there.
If you're on the phone with a vendor, a customer, a prospective customer, and they are looking for an answer as to, tell me about a time that you experienced a breach and how you communicated with people, how do you have that conversation? Because there's a spectrum of ways. You could have legal script it for you. You could have sales kind of run with it. But what's the best way to have that conversation to build trust?
I think I've been in security almost 20 years, and I've had a lot of conversations with other CISOs. I think transparency is the most important thing. I think people can sniff it out when you're not giving them a full answer or not giving them a complete answer, and that probably erodes trust faster than anything. And like any relationship that requires trust, when you lose it, it's so much harder to gain it back. So to be able to say, this is what we know for sure, this is what we don't know, is so much better than providing, trying to make it rosier than it is.
I would agree that transparency is huge. And I think as a security professional, we look forward to reading the the reports that come out after a breach happens. Like you learn so much from that when companies are upfront and forward about what had happened. And in that moment, when that initial phone call comes in, I think to Bill's point, you want to be as open as possible and as truthful as possible, just because people understand that these things will happen, but it's your response is how they're going to gauge you going forward.
Okay, let's shift gears and talk about AI. AI seems to be changing the game for cybersecurity attacks and the landscape and attack vectors. How do you think your roles will change a year from now as AI matures?
I think it's going to be tricky. I think AI, from a security perspective, it's a very interesting problem to solve because we're trying to use it to enhance the business and allow the business to move faster. We're also trying to use it for security in order to help us secure the company. But we also want to make sure that it doesn't come back and bite us while we're trying to do the first two things. So I think it's going to redefine the game. And I didn't buy into it for a long time, but the longer that you start to look at how things are evolving and agentic AI and just how companies are going to start putting their trust into a model that can, provide those results and learn over time, almost better than employees in some cases. I still think the employees are necessary to do the security side of it. I'm not advocating that we're all going to get overtaken by AI overlords, but I do think it's going to be a big change in how we think about and plan for protecting the company as AI becomes both more prevalent in the offensive for the attackers and in the defense of a company.
Yeah, and this is a great example of where, I think we need to plan for what we don't know and allowing ourselves a little bit of time and budget for things changing so rapidly in the next year that I can't predict exactly how we'll be using AI. And when people say AI, what do they mean exactly, right? Agentic AI versus just ML. So do we allow ourselves the space to say, okay, we don't have any answer, we don't have all of the answers today, but we know it's going to be huge for us. And so in addition to just, security for AI and AI for security, this arms race that's happening where now the barrier for a threat actor to use AI against a company is just going down and down. It's getting so much cheaper and easier. And the amount of skills required to do what they might have done years ago, it's just gotten so much simpler. So, that's the other thing that we need to be thinking about is how, like Will said, how do we defend against that, knowing that it's always gotten easier and there have been, kind of more tools available, but now, AI for security attacks, that's something that we're really going to have to figure out.
Yeah, and it's just, if you think about the evolution of how attackers have operated, it used to be a person really smart would go and bang on the front door of a company until they got in. And then it was like, oh, I can use these scripting tools and do it faster. And then the results they had out of those tools, they still had to decide, all right, who am I going to follow up on from that stage? But now with AI, like the AI will be able to automate that so much faster. And it used to just be you had to run faster than the person next to you. Well, now it's going to get a little even more challenging because I think the attacks are going to increase in speed, which means our defense has to move at that same rate.
Right, and the response.
Yeah.
I think we have to assume that they're going to get in, and we have to figure out how do we contain and remediate as quickly as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I love to remind CISOs of kind of two key things that I see that I think people forget. In the past couple of years, I've seen a huge shift towards the defense. And like you mentioned, I really believe it's also about the resilience piece, that you will get punched in the face. Can you get back up? How well can you get back up? And so when you think about things like the CIA triad, right? Availability, that's one of the key tenets for security. Or with NIST, it's about recovering. And so I think we've shifted so far towards defense. And I think smart CISOs are realizing, I have to also pay attention at how do I help get back up? How do I detect it as fast as I can, but also how do I get my business running again?
It's a perfect lead into my last question, which is this. The standard is not to be perfect. The standard is not to get it right. The standard is to try. The standard is to make progress. So, parting thoughts. How do you try? What's at the top of your list for making progress? What do you want to be known for just 2 quarters from now?
I want to be known for doing the boring stuff well. I want to be known for getting the company to a level where the average attack, the things that most companies fall short on, that's not us. I want to make sure that through good hygiene and good measured hygiene, that we're able to keep ourselves above and beyond where we need to be, so that we do have the time and the budget available to go handle the things we don't yet know about. But we got to always do the easy stuff first.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting when sports are a big part of my life. I'm a very competitive person, and I always played defense. And so I think that really, resonates with me, and how I've gotten into this field is that, like you will mention, if you do your job right, it's invisible. Nobody notices, right? It's very flashy to be on offense, but on defense, you just have to do your job right. It's just expected. And so, I think that I agree 100% that it's about ensuring that we have the right level of defense, that should anything happen, we're ready for it, we can respond fast, and we can get the business back up and running. And I think, that's where I want to be.
Thank you, Bill, Commvault's Chief Security Officer, and Will, Commvault's Deputy Chief Security Officer. We are so fortunate that you are at Commvault, and so fortunate that you help so many people internally and externally just get more sophisticated about what we're all facing in terms of cyber resilience. If you want to learn more, head over to our Readyverse. It is chock full of information and tips and practices for security leaders and executive leaders to get started, to mature, to get even more sophisticated, because this is a shared responsibility model, and it's all about helping each of us get stronger. Thanks so much.